All right, I think we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you all to Reimagine Delaware, Best Practices for Sustainable Communities. I'm Teresa Singleton. I am Vice President and Community Affairs Officer for the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here this morning on behalf of the bank and our partners. For those of you who are not familiar with the Federal Reserve Bank, our division promotes community development in low and moderate income communities and fair and impartial access to credit in underserved markets across the 3rd District, which includes the eastern portion of Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey, and the state of Delaware. We do this work mainly through conducting research on a variety of topics, from affordable housing to community development finance to economic development. However, the heart of our work is really done with the one-on-one outreach and the convening such as this, which enables us to better connect with and better understand how the economy is operating across our district. Ultimately, with each of these efforts, we're hoping to identify ways in which we can help leverage resources, be they knowledge resources, relationship resources, and if possible, financial resources that have the ability to positively impact local communities. Sydney Diavois, who is our Community Engagement Associate with responsibility over the state of Delaware, and if you haven't met her, you should. She's fantastic, and she's very committed to the state of Delaware. I know she joins me in saying that we're just so happy to be here in Delaware and to partner with the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh and Cinnaire for this conference. These partners have been integral in helping us identify key trends in community development across the state of Delaware and opportunities to support the partners and projects in this space. So let me give you a little bit of background. So every one of you has been to a meeting where you sat through the meeting, you were like, that was okay, but what next? And so sometimes you are in that space where you convene people together and there's no next step. And I want to tell you how this meeting came about, because this meeting is a result of a previous meeting, and I think it really shows the impact that we can have when we come together and share our thoughts. So more than a year ago, in May of 2015, our bank was on a tour doing Community Reinvestment Act roundtables, where we were traveling around our district talking with nonprofit organizations about CRA, what it is, how do you use it, and we were trying to collect more information on what the local needs are in each community. And so when we were here in Dover, we pulled together one of these roundtables, and it was through that conversation that we learned about some of the challenges that are facing neighborhood revitalization initiatives across the state. Stakeholders mentioned a few key things. They identified some significant barriers from moving to planning to implementation, and the need to build critical capacity to support residents and neighborhoods. So these were, some of the themes that were coming up in the conversation. We had a very limited time, and we were like, well, what does that mean? And is there something for us to do in that space? So we reached out to our partners and said, is this a critical issue? And they told us, yes, we're hearing the same thing, that nonprofit capacity is a serious challenge in terms of moving forward on some of these initiatives. And so we thought, rather than jump in and do something that's informed by a little bit of information, it made sense for us to pull together a focus group to really unpack and untangle some of those issues and help us think through an effort that we could use to speak to some of those concerns. And so the agenda that you have in front of you is really informed by the insights of that first Community Reinvestment Roundtable and the time and the energy of our focus group participants. And I'd like to take a second just to thank the members of that focus group: Fayetta Blake, Paul Calistro, Tamika Graham, Reverend Terrence Keeling, Patricia Kelleher, and Bruce Wright for participating in the focus group. It's really their insight that helped us pull together this agenda and think through who we needed around the table to move this conversation forward. And it's our hope that through this convening, critical questions and best practices can be addressed or understood for these issues. And we're very much looking forward to today's discussion and continuing to support community development across the state of Delaware. I'd like to end by thanking all of you for taking time out of your day. It takes a lot to put a pause on the day-to-day needs in your own professional lives to come out and think through these issues. And so I'd like to thank you first and foremost for making that time. And I'd really like to thank our presenters for all of the effort that they put into their presentations and what they're going to share with you later on today. I'd also like to encourage each of you to consider joining us for the 2016 Reinventing Our Communities Conference, which will be held in Philadelphia in September of 2016, where we'll be picking up on some of the themes that we'll be discussing here today. The conference's focus is really on building a transformative economy, and we'll be highlighting ways to connect people, place, and capital to encourage inclusive growth. And I know that this is a strong principle here in the state of Delaware, and it's a strong motivator to the work that you all do. This conference is not only an opportunity to learn a lot from practitioners and academics from across the nation, but it's also a really excellent chance to share the wonderful work and best practices that are coming from right here in Delaware. And that's something that both Sydney and I do when we meet with our colleagues and partners across the system, is highlight the great work that you all are doing. So again, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention today, and I would like to turn things over to Jim Peffley, who is the Executive Vice President for Lending and Eastern Regional Partnerships for Cinnaire, to introduce our opening speaker for today. So thank you. Jim?
Thank you, Teresa, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for making the trip to Dover. So the purpose of today's meeting is to think about ways to overcome the common barriers to community revitalization in Delaware. It's not to hear about the solutions that have been necessarily just to hear about the solutions that have been successful elsewhere. It's to hear those stories and then to regather and talk about how we can implement some of those ideas and perhaps some new ideas here in Delaware. So the real value in this day is going to be at the end of the day when we gather together in small groups to talk about what we heard and talk about some of the ideas we have regarding challenges. So please stay for the full day. And this gathering is designed not to be a standalone event. It's actually part of a broader focus on community development here in Delaware. One of the main areas of focus in community development is an effort founded by the Delaware Housing Coalition. And Delaware Housing Coalition formed a community development network last year. And the purpose of DHC's work is to direct assistance to communities in the form of capacity building and technical assistance, and also to build collaboration between partners. So the whole idea is to bring together folks who are involved in neighborhood revitalization to talk about shared approaches, challenges, and solutions. So ideally, we'll come out of this day with a set of ideas that DHC and others can kind of take and then leverage to advance our shared work. There are other efforts going on in the community development field here in Delaware. One is led by University of Delaware, and then our governor is hosting a conference later this year in the fall, the Governor's Conference on Housing, that will focus solely on community development. But before I introduce our speaker, our governor, I just wanted to thank everyone who's involved in community development work in neighborhood revitalization, regardless of what your role is, because it's vitally important. And even if you're not in direct contact with the folks we're serving, you are advancing this goal. You are creating opportunities for other folks. And for that, we are very thankful. I also wanted to thank the two folks who really did all the work to put this one-day conference together, and they are Deanna Sargent and Sydney Diava. Deanna's from Cinnaire, and Sydney from Federal Reserve Bank. So please thank both of them for their work. So one of my kind of quirks or hobbies is just to collect quotes. And there was one that I saw earlier this week that reminded me of our governor. And it says, leadership is associated with taking an organization, in this case the state, into the future, finding opportunities that are coming at it faster and faster, and successfully exploiting those opportunities. Leadership is about vision, and most of all, about producing useful change. And we've had the privilege of having Governor Markell lead this state for 7 years now. He took over at a very challenging time and helped us navigate through some very difficult challenges. And he's supported our community development mission for the whole 7 years. And in fact, he supported that mission during his 3 terms as state treasurer. His accomplishments are many. I'm not going to go through them, but I did want to just mention a couple important statistics. First, more state funding has been allocated to DSHA in Governor Markell's two terms than in any other administration in Delaware's history. 20% of the assisted affordable rental housing stock in the state has been either constructed or rehabbed during his term. And over 5,500 Delawareans were able to buy their first home as a result of assistance provided through DSHA under his leadership. And I also want to say one of his best decisions was one of his first, which was to appoint Anas Benati as the executive director of DSHA. He's done a great job, so thank you for that, Governor. And one final thing, I think if we didn't have term limits, I believe Governor Markell would be having be running for office and winning his third term. So it's a great privilege to introduce Governor Jack Markell.
Well, good morning, everybody. Just to be clear, term limits are a great thing. I would not be asking for any change in the Constitution or anything else. I think 8 years is good, and so. But thank you for that. And secondly, I'm glad that Anas was not here to hear that because his head would be swelling. But he has done a great job over at DSHA, as has the whole DSHA team. I want to start by thanking the Federal Reserve and the Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh and Cinnaire for putting this together. Three great organizations who are all having a real impact here at home, and I'm grateful to all of them. I feel sometimes when I'm asked to give these remarks a little bit guilty being the one who gets to stand up here, because the truth is the real work and the real progress and the real dynamism when it comes to issues like those you're discussing today have very little to do with people in my role, and it has everything to do with people like yourselves, because we know where the real work gets done. And I am incredibly appreciative to all of you who are here and to those who are doing work similar to yours from around the state, who are really making the progress happen. And it's one thing to attend a meeting, and I think we all attend a lot of meetings. And what's a whole lot more important is what happens after the meeting, sort of what Teresa was talking about earlier. And she was absolutely right, because the question is, you come to something like this and you say, okay, well, I learned a lot. Well, what do you do with it? And what is most interesting and most exciting to me is all the work that I see going on around the state at so many revitalization, so many community development projects. Some of them the state has a role in, some of them the state does not have a role in. And it doesn't really matter, because what matters is that people in our communities are taking charge and taking the lead and making things happen. We are very proud of the work that DSHA has done with the Strong Neighborhoods Fund as well as the downtown development districts. But what's really important is to be out and seeing these projects take shape. And I think having this conversation at this particular site is great, because just a couple blocks from here, Central Delaware Habitat for Humanity is doing some great work, which we are so appreciative of. And when you get to sort of get out of the conference spaces and you walk the streets and you sort of go block by block and you see the progress and you see the investment that individuals are making and the spillover effect that's having throughout the communities, that's what it's all about. And so when it comes to the downtown development districts, the whole idea behind that originally was that a small amount of public money would leverage a much bigger amount of private money. And it's exactly what's happened. And so far, I think about $10 million of public money has brought in about $120 million of private money just in the last couple years between Wilmington, Dover, and Seaford. Right here in Dover, I think about $15 million of private money being invested, which is great. And bigger sums in Wilmington and a pretty decent sum down in Seaford as well. And we're going to be expanding that soon to some additional towns in Delaware. They haven't been chosen yet, but I think they will be pretty shortly. But for me, to see that kind of work, and I see Paul, just came in, and Paul Calistro is really the one who introduced me to the whole idea of community revitalization probably about 15 years ago, when we took a walk around his office in Wilmington. And when I say, and I mean, it's easy to say things like community redevelopment takes place block by block, but when you walk the blocks and you see it, it just rings true. And that's why I think the work that you all are doing to invest and to encourage others to invest in their communities has such a spillover effect. It is amazing for me to see the effect that one investment in one or two houses can have on the neighbors who decide that, all right, since my neighbors are investing, I really now have confidence that if I invest in my place, I'm actually going to be able to get a return on it. And so I think the other part that has really struck me is that although the real, I think a lot of us think about this as sort of, a real estate, which it is. But what's incredibly exciting to me is to see the projects where the real estate investment is from the very beginning an important, but just one piece of a bigger investment. And I think of, what, I know he's not here today, but Reverend Keeling, what he's doing over at Eastside Rising, where the real estate and revitalization is really significant, but what's just as significant is the investment in human resources and human capital and workforce development training and helping people develop job skills and helping people get jobs and all of the other, and connecting people to the other services. And when we think about, and so, this is not just about, real estate development, this is about community revitalization, it's about sustainable, I can't remember the exact term, sustainable, what is sustainable what? Sustainable communities. Well, sustainable communities, there are a lot of different pieces to that. And I think that's one of the things, and that's why I say that, the real inspiration rarely comes from government, but it comes from those of you who are out in the field putting all of these pieces together. And I think what we look for is people, and we have a great DSHA team that's here, is folks from agencies like DSHA or people in the governor's office or elsewhere following your lead. And so what I hope to come out of this is that the folks from the state who are here can learn more about what's going on in communities throughout the state, learning best practices from elsewhere, and figuring out how we can continue to play a supportive role. I mean, there is a reason when, Jim mentioned that we've put more money into housing, than previously in Delaware history. There's a reason for it. I mean, at a time of incredibly limited resources, which we have had, it is even more incumbent upon us than it normally is to make sure that we are investing in areas that are going to yield the biggest return to taxpayers. And the evidence is so clear that investments in housing yield a huge return. And that's why we've put such a focus there. The same can be said, by the way, it's a totally different area, but early childhood education. We put a huge investment in early childhood education because there's a huge return from that as well. And these things go together, by the way. I mean, these are not like just sort of standalone things. And one of the things I am particularly appreciative about the work that DSHA has done is, they're not just in the business of managing some real estate. They're in the business of, really, they're in the hope business. And so I've had a chance now a few times to meet with residents and with a lot of kids who live in places that are, managed by DSHA. And it's been great to see the work that they're doing to build community as well. So we know that we're incredibly dependent upon all the partnerships throughout the state, and to all of you who are part of those partnerships, to all of you who are making this work happen, and to all of you who are doing work today that will literally yield in return to the residents, to the communities, to the taxpayers for decades to come. I say thank you. And the fact is, I know very well that years from now when people look back at some of the work that's being done, people aren't going to know who the governor was. They're not going to know who the members of the General Assembly were. They're not going to know who the head of DSHA was, and that doesn't matter. What they'll know is that there was a whole community back in 2016 who is thinking about the future and who are making the investments both in real estate and human capital and everything else to make sure that people in Delaware have a better life for the future. And so that's what all of you are doing. And so to all of you, and again to the Fed, to the Federal Home Loan Bank, and to Cinnaire, I am especially grateful for what you're doing. I hope you have a great conference, and I hope you take everything that you learn from this great conference, that all of us could go out together after today and figure out what we can do even better to make the future better for all of us. Thank you all very much.